Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here for our week in review stream for this week of DFS. Hopefully everyone is more awake than I am. It's way too early for me, but still gonna get our hands dirty, look back at last week's results, and talk a little bit shit about some lineups too. I can see we already have last week's champion down there in chat who says, "Oh, now you want to do a review." So yeah, Nick, the system's rigged against you, right? Obviously didn't do the review last week. Has nothing to do with the team aspect. But hey, shout out to Nick out there who won last week. He kicked all our butts in that contest. He had Riley in that lineup. I believe it was a 6 of 6 as well. So hey, tip of the hat there to you, Nick. You'll definitely get your recognition. And let's hop right into this thing, right? We do these streams every single week to not only take a look at your lineups down in chat. So if you have any, feel free to go ahead and toss them in there. But to take a look at the meta and take a step back and try and maybe learn a little bit from our results. There'll be weeks when we go out there, absolutely kill it, right? A few weeks ago, actually last week, if you did a review stream, I went about 6x last week. A lot of guys in the community killed it. Those weeks don't really have that much to talk about, right? Because things went relatively well. And things don't go so well, there's usually a lot that we can glean from it, or at least try and learn from, right? So I'm not going to give anything away here. Actually, I'll just say it was right about an average week. So it'll be in between those two extremes. But in the community contest, we had quite a few solid lineups, a lot of 6 of 6s. So even though there were, 28 entries in this contest this week, obviously with the Mexico Open, a little bit less interest, which makes sense. But a lot of 6 of 6 lineups. So the winner was Harley71, one of the OGs in the community. And of course, he pulled off the feat with the 6 of 6. But not only that, he had the winner. He had Brandon Wu up there. He had all top 33 finishers. His worst performance, and I put that in quotes there, right, was a Ryan Gerard, who was just fine at $6,900, was relatively low owned. What I really like here is, of course, Finau was going to be extremely chalky. I mean, even Jon Rahm got quite a bit of ownership in this contest. Let's see. Let's find a Jon Rahm lineup, right? 42.9%. So it wasn't like one was more chalky than the other here. So he mixed in all of these pivots. I mean, his highest owned player was 7.1%. So essentially was owned in like 2 or 3 out of the 28 lineups. I like what I'm seeing here. If you were to have put this in a large field single entry, right, these kind of players might have been a little bit higher owned, but still would have been pivots. I mean, SH Kim was like 6-7%. Brandon Wu was like 4-5%. Emiliano Grillo had much higher ownership than the 7.1% that we had here. But overall, this kind of structure is how you take a piece of chalk, right, like a Tony Finau, and make it work in your lineup. So if you're watching this, Harley, I know you watch a lot of these on the replay. Tip of the cap to you. That's a really solid lineup. Second place was another 6 of 6. It did have Cameron Champ, who was my sweetheart this week, of course, guys. Tony Finau, another outright win. So I have to say that. So last week, right, for props, it was about an average week for DFS, ended up right about average when it was all said and done. But we hit the outright on Finau. So it was a fun week. We had a bet on him. We had a bet on Jon Rahm. Guys like Cameron Champ in the top in DFS were nice to have. I had a bunch of Brandon Wu. It was a good sweat. I'll say that much, right? From the financial perspective, it's not like we went out there, we 10-20x this week, but we profited on pretty much all 3 fronts. And like I said, having the sweat there on Sunday with both of those guys in contention was a little bit more relaxing than most, right? Whoever won, I was going to be pretty happy with it. The fact that we got the 10-1 Tony Finau to hit rather than the plus 350 for Jon Rahm was probably the best case scenario, right? Because if Rahm won, I would have won a little bit less. And I actually would have been right about break even for my outrights, because plus 350 isn't all that much when I bet him. I bet Tony Finau. I bet Jaeger. I bet Ben Martin. I mean, I bet a bunch of people this week. So like I said, we didn't win a boatload. It's not like we went out there and won like 10, 20 grand, something like that. But it was a fun weekend. It was a fun sweat. So just wanted to throw that out there. So Spur had a 6 of 6. He had Andrew Novak, who, by the way, guys, if you haven't seen the Twitter beef yet, Andrew Novak is not happy that he doesn't have a spot in next week's tournament. Akshay Bhatia, of course, 25% owned. A lot of that is because of the steam of him being in my content. Steven Jaeger, 21%. Yeah, he was chalky pretty much no matter what contest. I'll say, right, there's differences between Harley's lineup and then what we had with Spur here. Spur took a little bit more chalk, right? He took the Steven Jaegers of the world. He took the Akshay Bhatias, who in regular contest was much lower owned. Let's see. Let me give you an exact number over there in Akshay. He was like $7,400, right? Yeah, he was 14.5% owned. So Obviously, got a little bit more steam in this community contest. So yeah, I'm not that worried about ownership here. You took a couple chalky plays. You mixed in Patrick Rogers, who was at least like average with the ownership. Novak, Cameron Champ were sub 7% plays. Yeah, I like what I'm seeing here, Spur. Mike Honcho, another 6 of 6. He had Toasty in there. He had some Toasty ownership in the $5 GPP. It was like 12% owned. Pause, 5 of 6. He had Rage or Reason there with another 6 of 6 lineup. And like I said, if you weren't finishing with 6 of 6 this week, especially in this contest, you were not going to cash. T Swens with a 5 of 6 that cashed. He had Kazire in there, which I thought it was a solid play. So that's excusable for sure. Nate Lashley, a lot of leverage here. I like the Carson Young, Nate Lashley move. The Ben Martin, a little bit more chalky in our contest just because I steamed him up this week. I like what I'm seeing here. Like plenty of leverage to be had. You ate your chalk with John Rahm and you differentiated elsewhere. That is what I believe to be the smart play this week. You had a 4 of 6 cash, really good 4 of 6 then. You can see played both guys up top. It makes sense. Europa had a 5 of 6, Delbert 5 of 6, Ben 4 of 6 that cashed, played both guys up top. I talked about that quite a bit last week, which obviously paid off quite heavily for some of these people, and that's outside the cash line. Let's take a look at my lineup before hopping into some of yours down there in chat. I can see it down there. We got Travis and Nick down there. My lineup was a little bit more traditional. I did not take both guys up top. And this is the same lineup that I entered into the other $100 single entry. So this wasn't just my community contest entry. And I went with that bomber narrative. We had Finau up top, Pendrith as our second man in, obviously a highly leveraged play outside of this contest. He was only 17.9%, but in other contests, let's see, $5 GPP, for example, Taylor Pendrith was 3.8% owned, so essentially unowned, right? So taking that chalky piece with a Finau up top, I thought that Taylor Pendrith would be a good way to counterbalance that ownership. And at the end of the day, that is exactly what happened. Matt Wallace, he started off hot, right? He was -4 after the first day, shot +6 in day 2. I mean, that was just atrocious. So yeah, I have no idea what happened to him on Friday, but if he didn't do that, would have been sitting pretty pretty right there. Another bomber, Will Gordon bomber, of course, got into the top 24. He also faltered on Sunday, so up until Saturday evening, I was feeling pretty good about Will Gordon. Bramlett, a bomber who made the cut, and then Kyle Westmoreland, who missed the cut on the number, was kind of my flyer pick of the week. And I know we have Nick down there in chat, and I saw your lineup, Nick. Let me just confirm it, right? You had Kyle Westmoreland too. Yeah, a lot of people in our contest took him. So I think it was 4 out of the 28 players ended up taking Kyle Westmoreland. It's because he was like one of the main bombers down low. And if he makes the cut, I believe I get another 10 6 of 6s through. I had 38 this week out of my set of 150. And I had a lot of my like top 10, top 15 lineups with a Kyle Westmoreland. So that was a little bit unfortunate. The Matt Wallace thing, he almost went full Keegan. I know he wasn't first round leader, right? But he was up there in the top 5 after the first round and then shoots a 77. I mean, like the Chris Berman, come on, man meme is what we need for this guy right now. Let's see. We got Travis down there, says 6 of 6 with Finau, McNeely, Martin, Griffin, Roy, and Norman. You barely cashed. Yeah, the McNeely's not going to help there, right? So in that 9K range, you could either taken Rahm, right, gone that more studs and duds approach, or taken, Pendrith. Anyone else in that 9K range, even Woodland probably would have scored more. Yeah, your stinker there was McNeely. Let me see if I can find a lineup with McNeely that cashed in this contest. Probably not, right? Like in our community contest, if you had McNeely, it looks like you just didn't cash. Because I knew there were people that had him in here. Let's find the first McNeely lineup. We're still going, by the way. We're at 21. Wait, did no one play? I know somebody had to have played that bum. I guess not. No one played that bum in our contest. Interesting. Probably a good reason for that, right? All right, let's go through your lineup. Actually, I don't think you had it in the community contest. That's all right. No idea how you didn't use Finau in here. You had 80% this week. Yeah, good point. I played him because obviously he was one of my core plays. I just thought he was going to win. But yeah, I had 70% of him and John Rahm. So I probably should have played both of them in my single entry. That's what I'm kicking myself about. A few minutes late, but damn, Kinzaya ruined you. Yeah, let's go back to your lineup. So I was pointing you out a little bit earlier. solid lineup, 5 of 6. I'm okay with Kazire too. He missed the cut on the number. Yeah, nothing really to say there. He got a little bit unlucky, right? So no real constructive criticism other than the fact that I liked the leverage that you were getting. You took your John Rahm chalk. Ben Martin was really only chalk in this contest. And then, I should say Batia, right? Batia was pretty chalky, right? Like 14%. So you took your 2 pieces of chalk and differentiated elsewhere. So I like what I'm seeing there, T-Swin. Carson Young was sneaky, right? 7.1%, finished T15. Love that play. Nate Lashley, you never know what you're going to get there. I'd probably prefer him at a shorter course, but that's just me. And then Ben Martin, obviously, pretty solid week. So I love it. Let's take a look at some of my GPP lineups. So after day one, put out a self mush of a little bit and posted that I was in 5th place in the community contest. Obviously, in that screenshot, I was winning like 40 something grand in a contest with 25 grand up top. So I didn't post the actual standings, but I was in first for the first, second, and 4th place in that GPP, which obviously I've been in that situation more than a handful of times. I know that it's never going to last. Only one of my 4 golf GPP wins has been a wire-to-wire victory, and that was at the Mayakoba Classic like 4 years ago. I had the winning lineup after round 1, and that lineup stayed in first place after 2nd, 3rd, and of course the 4th round when I ended up winning. That's a huge rarity. That's never going to happen. That's like a golfer going out there and going wire to wire. So I knew what I was getting myself into. I was just having a little bit of fun at my own expense. And still pretty solid week. Actually ended up slightly under ROI because of a few late blunders. That Will Gordon, last 5-6 holes where he ended up over par, ended up going down from like 5th place to 24th, absolutely killed this lineup. This lineup was in the top 50 until that point. Steven Yeager had a late blunder as well. He had a bogey on one of his last few holes. That didn't help. Cameron Champ made a double bogey at some point during his final round. So this lineup could have literally taken down the GPP. I mean, Brandon Wu, right, was in first place when that was happening. Steven Yeager is up there, I believe, like T8 was the minus 12 position at that point. Of course, Will Gordon was like 3rd or 4th place. It was a tough scene. So it wasn't the best Sunday sweat. Even our second best lineup was a 5 of 6. Ben Taylor went off this week. Absolutely love that play. Of course, Smother Me and Birdies went out there, scored over 100 points. My best lineups should have been some of my 6 of 6 lineups with Drom and Finau, but almost all of those builds for me had something go wrong. So let's go ahead and find a few more of them. You can see there's a McNeely lineup up there, 947th, that mofo. The rest of the lineup was fantastic there. Let's see. Let's find more of those combo lineups. And you can see a bunch of them aren't towards the top because of just the way I put them together. So obviously those 2 up top, Batia was the absolute nuts. And then 3 guys who just made the cut, right? Echeverria, 66, 49th. Like that's not going to get it done. Let's see another one here, right? Cameron Champ, Ben Taylor, 2 great plays. Those were 2 optimal plays up there with 2 guys up top. You could have also played for the optimal lineup. And then a 5 of 6. Brent Grant misses the cut. I felt like a little bit unlucky. In 34% of my lineups this week, I went really heavy on Rahm and Finau, guys. I told you guys I was going to do that. 34% of my lineups had them together, not just Rahm or just Finau in a lineup, had both of them together. So I had a lot of different combinations here down low. You'd see another one that had Smotherman and Taylor, but a missed cut, right? What I needed, and what you can see towards the top of these GPPs here, especially the ones that were going with both, is a Toasty probably would have been really helpful down low. But, putting Batia, Taylor, and then maybe getting, one more of those value plays together in a lineup. You can see, in fact, this top lineup was duplicated 4 times, which you never see in PGA DFS. You never see duplicated lineups and trains taking down GPPs. Crazy that a 12% Toasty is going to get that done. It honestly, in 12% Toasty, I projected him for like 7% ownership, which was way higher than pretty much everyone else. And he still came in higher owned than that. That's kind of crazy. This Bevo guy, another guy who played Toasty there, but look at this, right? It's playing those 2 guys up top and then moving on. So we're going to take a look at ownership here in a second. We're looking at my ownership projections, compare them, try and get a feel for some of the game theory here. But, I was a huge proponent of getting to these sort of builds, and there were a lot of people out there with backlash. I mean, I had multiple comments of like, how could you play the 6K range? How could you, take all these 7K guys that people were just hating on this week. I mean, the first regular lineup, right, is one with Tony Finau, of course, your winner down here in 8th place. The rest of the lineups, I mean, here's another one, right? In 9th place, same thing there with Stat ATL. Actually, I know he follows me on Twitter, so what's going on? Nice finish there, 9th place. But you can see the actual nuts lineups, the ones that took down this GPP, a majority of them were these Rom Finau combinations. So I think it's worth exploring. It's just worth remembering, I think, in the future, when you have two players that are that much better than the rest of the field, love the golf course, and are on form coming into an event, maybe you just play both of them, right? Maybe you don't overthink it. You go, these are the best two plays on the slate, and you fit them into your lineup under no means. I mean, into any means necessary. So I know down in chat, I actually want to go ahead and do this shout out now. This was ridiculous, by the way. And I threw this idea out there, and I didn't know if anyone was actually going to pull the trigger on it. But I'm glad that my boy Too Legit to Quit did. So let me share my screen here, show you guys what I'm talking about. Take a look at this bet. It's an outstanding bet. He took Tony Finau to win, parlayed it with Jon Rahm to top 5. So rather than getting plus 750 odds, which he was even a little bit late to the party, right? I got plus 1,000 odds because I took him literally first thing when the board dropped on Monday. But then he paired it up with Jon Rahm to end up getting better than 10-1 odds. In fact, what did he get here? Plus 1316 on a $250 bet and made $3,500. So not a bad way to put that together, to say the least. And like I said, that was the nuts play this week. And I think going into the future, when we get into situations like this, maybe you just eat that chalk up top and play this strategy. Because I also argued that a lot of like the 6-7K golfers were really not that much different than some of the 8K guys. I mean, truth be told, right? We look at some of the pricing here. I mean, Smalley, Garrett Higo, I think is like a perfect example, right? He was $8,300 this week. There's no difference between him and Ben Taylor. And what was Ben Taylor's price? Was he like $6,800 or something around that? Yeah, he was $6,800. No difference. I mean, even the form was almost identical. And sure, Garrett Higo has a tour win. Ben Taylor doesn't. But I mean, Garrett Higo's win was God knows how long ago. So that's just something to consider going forward. What's going on? Kai says, do you and oh, this guy. I don't know who Mike Oak. I don't know if you're trying to troll me with that name, but if I don't know who Mike is, if it's an actual guy, I'll have to look into him. But thank you. MFN says, do you think the Mexico Open was a top 2 tournament for the year, like the Masters? But a Masters debuter would say no. Top 2 tournament for the year? Absolutely not. No, I wouldn't say so. No, not even close to it. It's probably one of the bottom 5 tournaments, unfortunately. Travis Ward says, back to your lineup. You saw McNeely as a higher to make the cut than Pendrith. How do you choose who to go with? How do you differentiate between garbage? Good question. I played both of them this week, right? So I went with McNeely and Pendrith. I would agree that McNeely was maybe a safer play, but it kind of depends on the contest you're in, right? If you're in a cash lineup, then safe is great. In large field GPPs, I'm not about safe. In fact, I would play McNeely because of just the low ownership upside. He was a player that he's been injured, hasn't really been himself for the last 3-4 months. And you were kind of hoping that he would snap out of that, right? He would figure it out, maybe feel a lot more healthy, a little bit more comfortable this week. And because a long-term form, McNeely is a top 5 player in this field. I mean, undoubtedly. You look at the last 100 round baseline, that's extremely evident, right? He's, especially a year ago, was one of the hotter, young, up-and-coming players in all the PGA Tour. Injuries will do that to you, right? They'll really derail your career. If you thought he was going to have that come around, that injury issues go away, then he could have had a really good week. Pendrith, though, was the same kind of guy, except without the injury stuff. So I went with, actually, let's just bring it up. Let's bring up my exposure. Let me see. Do I have my exposure on this sheet? I might not. I don't have my exposure on here, but I can tell you I was about 33% Taylor Pendrith, and I believe like 28 to 30% of Maverick McNeely. So it's not like I went way heavier on Pendrith than to McNeely, but those injury concerns did make me slightly more hesitant about getting in that direction. All right, let's see what other comment we have down there. Nothing. All right, let's go through some of these ownership notes. So I promised you guys we'd take a look at ownership, and I mean, up top, I mean, Other than, I'd say, Wyndham Clark, who I think I underprojected a little bit right here. You can see right about a 5% difference. I felt pretty good about everyone down to Alex Noren. Alex Noren, of course, no one plays the guy. Everyone hates him, which seemingly was the move this week as he missed the cut. But up top, these Jon Rahm, Tony Finau numbers, there was a number out there. I'm not going to call out the website that had Jon Rahm 25% owned. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are we doing here if you're paying money for that sort of projection and not having that grilled week to week? So going into the future, I almost want to bring up other people's ownership numbers and start to like show some of the differences, but I also don't want to get in trouble. So we'll just leave it at that, right? Take a look at the Jon Rahm projection. If it wasn't really close to like 45%, your guy probably was doing something wrong. Either way, though, it's pretty obvious to get these numbers, by the way, when you run the salary analysis. And I've shown this on stream before, but I'll just go ahead and mention it again here. Whenever you're building lineups, 99.5% of lineups spend within $200 of the salary cap. So that means they either spend their full 50 grand or they spend 49.8, right? Something in there. Might be 49.9, right? In between those two numbers. But either way, they pretty much spend all of their salary, which means when we're making these ownership projections, it's really easy to predict some of the players up top. Like, exactly of your lineups, how much up top is going to be used. And with super mega chalk like this, it was even easier to polarize the ownership. So like 45 to 50% on Rahm, let's say close to like 25 to 30% for Tony Finau was almost locked in. That was almost by default going to be the case because people were going to spend their salary. And we knew that people weren't just going to pepper this 9K range because they're so much worse than everybody else. So that's why when that site puts out 25% ownership, and again, I'm not going to actually say what site that was. If you're subscribed to it, you probably already know who it is. It's so ridiculous because there's zero chance it could have been 25%. That was never going to happen. And whatever algorithm they're using for that is probably just somebody guessing by hand, I would guess. So just throwing that out there for anyone who subscribes to that site. In this 9K range, though, I didn't play much here at all, right? I faded the Wyndham Clarks, the Gary Woodlands of the world. Both of them made the cut on the number, or at least I think Gary Woodland made it by like 1-2 strokes. That was kind of tilting. I was really hoping that they would miss the weekend, especially Wyndham Clark at like 25%. Nicola Hogard was another player that I was kind of hoping would falter too. You can see he was 16.2% in this $5 GPP. He also hardly made the cut. If those guys would have ended up slipping out of it, my ROI would have been even better than it was this week, especially on some of like the single entry stuff. Those guys got absolutely saved in some of those lineups. The 6 of 6 would have gone down to like 2-3% if those guys wouldn't have done that. In this 8K range, ownership was pretty spread out. I mean, we were expecting that. You can see what was it like a 5 to 13% range between all the ownership numbers. The lowest owned guy being a Pendrith at like 5%, the highest owned being a Patrick Rogers at 13.6%. Which made it relatively easy to play this 8K range. I mean, you just pick your guys, right? You pick your 4 or 5 favorite guys. So I don't really think there's a ton to focus on there. I mean, there was no one you had to have either. I mean, other than Brandon Wu, right, who ended up finishing in 3rd place. I guess Steven Yeager, right, ended up scoring 86 points. That would have been pretty nice to have. Rio with 110 points would be pretty nice to have. I mean, I guess, right, Rio, Brandon Wu were guys that you wanted to have in the large field GPPs, but you could have just gone with these top 2 guys, right? 130 points, 144 points for Jon Rahm, Tony Finau up there. That more than made up for this 8K range, right? So there were multiple ways to do it this week. As you kind of saw in the GPP, I'm going to cycle back over to Draftkings. I mean, from the lineup construction, actually shared the wrong screen there. Apologies. Lineup construction perspective, it didn't really matter what you did, right? If you were balanced, you could have won the GPP. If you went with this top heavy approach, you could have got it done too. Let's see. Yeah, memory serves me correctly. It was 9th place that had the next balanced lineup. It didn't even have Tony Finau. That's worth noting too. The reason why this lineup didn't have Tony Finau, and I can tell you guys this, is because it forced him into the 7K range. It forced him into taking a really nasty Cameron Champ, right? Who scored over 100 points. It forced him to take an Eric Cole at $7,500. It forced him out of that 8K range, right? With the exception of a Brandon Wu. So that's why I wanted to point that out, is sometimes lineup construction, it's not even about the players that you're able to buy. It's the guys that you're forced into, because this 8K range, while there weren't a ton of guys scoring 110, 120 points, look at this 7K range. Eric Cole, Dylan Wu scored nearly 100 points. Harry Hall, 92 points. That's pretty solid. You wouldn't have hated that. Cameron Champ, 107. Down here, Smotherman scored 105. Ben Taylor, 103 points. Obviously, pretty solid ownership numbers on him in terms of leverage. You can see 87 points for Carson Young. I know T. Swen played him this week. Alejandro Tosti, 100 points. Like, they're outscoring their 8K options. I mean, a lot of them are, right? It's not even just a few, like Raul Pareda. No one could have seen that coming, by the way. 82.5 points, 79.5 for who's that? Is that Werenski that scored that? Wow. He must have made a bunch of birdies this week if Werenski was getting that many points out there. Even Michael Gligic went out there, scored 81.5 points. I mean, they're scoring the same, if not more points than their counterparts here in the 8K range. So the next time you hear somebody saying a weak field like this, there's no way that these cheap options going to get towards the top at a resort-style course on Pass Palom. Just take a look at this event and remind yourself that they certainly can. Even guys like Alejandro Tosti that we literally have never heard of before. Still laughing at the bogey props you took. Yeah, so am I. I took Benny Ann, who shot like 7 under, and I had Patrick Rogers. And Patrick Rogers actually ended up pushing. So I should be that mad at Patrick Rogers. But P. Rogers made 9 birdies yesterday. What a day for him. Throwing shade like he's Roger Clemens, you know it. You took Smotherman, but was thinking it'd be better for some other man. Yeah, I liked Smotherman this week. I like him. First off, he won you heard it 1,000 times on the broadcast, I'm sure, right? He won the Latino American Tour event here when it was like 3-4 years ago. I think actually 2018 was when Smotherman went out there and won that event. I liked him from the ball striking perspective too. So I think it was a match made in heaven. But let's see, what was his price tag? He was way more expensive than he should have been. Right, because $6,900 based on his recent form, way too much. He's been absolute dog shit for quite some time. Let's see, who'd you play around him? I played Cameron Champ, who was maybe he's the man that you were talking about. Other than that, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's other decent plays in that range, but Smotherman to me was probably the best one. Just because of that form, because of that narrative coming in, I really liked him. I played Carl Juan. He actually had a pretty decent week, 66 points. He completely fell off there on Sunday, so that was unfortunate. Matty Schmid, he should have made the cut. On the last hole, guys, he was one within the cut line, and he double bogeyed it. Hit it OB off the tee, and the cut line actually moved backwards to -1, so he would have made it if he just bogeyed that last hole. Hit it OB, though, so... I have to say, that was probably the most tilting miscut this week. Yeah, Ryan Gerard was there. I mean, Dylan Fratelli. Oh, yeah, by the way, guys, Dylan Fratelli, horrible play this week, right? But he's the same play. I played him for the same reason as Cameron Champ, right? So, like, I already know that someone's going to clown me about the whole Dylan Fratelli thing, right? Well, the same thought process that got me onto Cameron Champ is why I played Dylan Fratelli, right? And that's why I play 150 lineups. That's why I take those risks. So I know there's going to be that clown, that bozo out there that goes, oh, how'd the Dylan Fratelli play go? Well, yeah, how'd the Cameron Champ play go, huh? Right? Pretty low ownership, right? 4.4%. The nuts up there in the top 5 scored over 107 points. That's why you take those risks. That's why you go after that course fit over some of the recent form. Because it works, right? He finished top 6 last year, did the same thing this year, right? Do we think that that's just a coincidence that he comes in without form and then shows up at this golf course? Or do we finally want to give some credence to course fit? Because all of the evidence is there in front of you. It happens every single week. It's just whether you choose to believe it or not, right? So I don't know. I'm throwing shade there too. If you know who you are, if I'm saying that to you. Cameron Champ out there, he's probably my favorite play this week. Alrighty, guys, that's all I've got for this stream. We're going to cut it off, get over there to the course breakdown. We've got ourselves an elevated field. I'm super hyped for it. We've got the Wells Fargo, which I've been to a bunch, so extremely familiar with the track. In terms of changes this year, I don't think there's much. You can see, I guess, all the changes at the President's Cup are still going to be there because it was only 31 weeks ago. They were saying that they're back to the normal routing. So if you watched Quail Hollow during the President's Cup, it's not going to be the same order. They're back to their normal order. And I have to say, what I like about this event, it's kind of similar to the Mexico Open it highlights a specific skill set, right? You're looking for, especially at this course, really good long iron players, but it's a 7,500 yard par 71. Those longer players are going to find themselves at the top of the leaderboard, right? The shorter hitters, for them to get to an optimal performance, are going to have the week of their lives. Whereas longer hitters like a Luke List, for example, has had a lot of success at this golf course. He can have maybe his B game and get up there into contention. So that's why I like a course like this for DFS, for outright bets, all that sort of fun stuff. It kind of condenses the field and for who can actually go out there and win. So I'm liking it. I like the event in person. I was debating going this year, but we're gonna take it relaxed. We're just gonna sit back, watch one of these elevated events from home for once. I've been to like the last 4 at this point, so I think we can cool it a little bit. Just like I said, just watch it from home for once. Actually see the golf shots. But yeah, excited. I'm going to be there at the U.S. Open. I'm debating going up there to Rochester for the PGA Championship. I think it's a really good course for Jordan Spieth. I think he's got a good chance to go out there, perhaps even win this PGA Championship. So I'll probably be making my way out there. But like I said, guys, that is all I've got for this week. Stop on by for next week's Speak and Review stream. We'll be doing the same thing after this elevated field, and hopefully for all the tournaments going forward. I didn't do one for the team event. You know, Nick was throwing a little bit of shade there, which I understand, just because of the format, right? With the team event, ownership, all that kind of stuff, it was really annoying to put together the review sheet. I mean, that was really the big thing, is like getting combined ownership numbers from Draftkings, extremely annoying. Even just doing showdown projections last week was absolutely atrocious. I'm glad I did them because the ROI on the team stuff was great, but it was just an absolute head case. So I'm glad we're back to normal events. We're going to have normal events for the next like 4 months. So we'll have a lot of these streams going forward. So looking forward to it. 3M Open, still thinking about that. When is that? Let me bring that up. I think, from my understanding, it's a good part of the year for me. I've been thinking about that, T-Swin. Let's see. I'm very likely to go to the PGA, right? I told you guys about the US Open. 100% going to be at the US Open. That Los Angeles Country Club, I just have to see. It's historic. Let's see. Where's 3M Open? I must have passed it. July. It's not the worst. I'm going to be going to the Tour Championship, but that's not till a month later. I'd say there's a decent chance because I've got nothing going on at that point, and I'm not going to be going to any events at least the month before that, right? I'm not going to any of the events overseas. I'm not going to like the John Deere. I'm not going to like Rocket Mortgage, Travelers. I think it might work out this year, T-Swin. We'll have to see. If you come up, we'll be playing around. Oh, you know it. Yeah, for sure. We'll be having a racket out there on the golf course too. I appreciate you guys. Smash that like button on the way out of here, and I'll catch you guys for the content this week.